All right, let's see if I can get this to. And that's the wrong screen, I'm sure. Hang on a second. And still the wrong screen, I'm sure.
You got it.
It's on there?
We can see it now, John.
Yep.
All right, great. Okay. Some years ago, a friend asked me if I had a personal motto, and I've been a Boy Scout for a long time, so get this thing going here. Supposed to go forward. Oh, that's right. This doesn't work. And so be prepared naturally sprang to mind. Or, as I often paraphrase it, never go to the moon without duct tape. But be prepared is a Scout motto, and I quickly realized I do have a more deeply personal motto as well, which is taken from a 2-page soliloquy that conveys the essential thrill of motorcycling better than anything I've ever read. And here it is with a sliver of context. I knew this was my personal motto because a few months earlier, I had taken that last sentence, typed it in bold all caps, and stuck it to the gas tank of my motorcycle so that I would never, ever forget it while I was riding.
John,
Hi.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We still are just seeing your title screen.
Oh, great. You missed all of that.
Let's start over again.
Oh, man.
If-
It's the title screen, huh? So,
We have an advanced slides. If you want me to, I can advance for you though.
that worked so much better when we were practicing it last week.
That's all right.
Did that do anything?
There we go. That's your next slide. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, there's the Boy Scout motto. Never go to the moon without duct tape. Another way of saying be prepared. Is it advancing properly now? You're seeing it all?
Yes.
Okay, great. And this, which I didn't read, but is again where I derived my personal motto. It has to be done right. Oops, got it going backwards. Which is staring me in the face every time I get on my K1300S. All right, so who is John Perry Dancoe? Whoops, we just blew it again. We're still good? 1991?
Yep.
All right. This is a bit of a rehash of that excellent introduction that was given, but my relevant history begins in 91. I was hired as a tooling and process design engineer at MSP Industries, which is a tier 1 automotive supplier of forged drivetrain components, and is, of course, where Plex, then known as Plexus, was originally developed as an in-house ERP system. And by 91, Plex was running every aspect of that company, and it was certainly one of my primary engineering tools. In 1994, MSP acquired a bankrupt CNC machining company, BBC, and I was installed as chief engineer, where I immediately implemented Plexus. And that's the first time that it had ever been transplanted from MSP, where it hadn't been implemented so much as organically grown. By 97, I was hired at Plex Systems, which had been spun off from MSP as an independent software company. Originally hired as an application developer, and in those days we built custom client server systems. But the custom systems were soon phased out in favor of the cloud solution, which we're all using today. By 2007, I was working exclusively as an implementation project manager. But in 2011, Plex initiated a product management team, of which I became a charter member. And as the team grew during the next decade, my responsibilities came to focus on the product data management, or PDM, and quality management systems, QMS. And I also played a critical role throughout the product lifecycle of the lot management system. Now, last December, yet another victim of the COVID economy, I was among many Plexians let go during a substantial reduction in force. And my response was to do something I'd always figured was in my back pocket, to leverage my professional experience as an independent technology consultant. So, why vonBlitz? vonBlitz means of lightning, and the fundamental nature of lightning epitomizes how I aspire my services to be perceived. So successful me and my services are characterized by energy, speed, and brilliance. And just what does Plex vonBlitz design? Well, what do you need? Let's talk. I'll let you know if I don't have a good idea of how to approach it. Now that was a bit flippant, a bit facetious. Here's what's really in my wheelhouse. Obviously, at the top of it is my deep expertise in the Plex manufacturing cloud. My first project, my first customer, I'm working with a Plex subscriber doing Vision Plex development, custom reporting and analytics, and that seems to be where I'm going. But I certainly can have much to say about configuration analysis, help you optimize your systems, implementation services I could certainly provide, quality management consulting, et cetera, even going down to my older skills in mechanical design, and generally problem solving, which that's what I think of myself as a problem solver. Tell me what your problem is. I'll think about creative ways to address that problem. All right, so moving on, enough about vonBlitz design. I'll spend the rest of my time today trying to provide real value here and now, and I'll divide that time into two parts. First, a high-level overview of the Plex quality management system. Probably won't be a whole lot new for people who are really in deep on it. And then I would like you to ask me anything, hoping I can provide the best possible value in exchange for the time you're willing to spend with me today. Much like Chris Balo, I usually set up my presentations so that I max out my time so there's no questions. But today I'm really trying to leave plenty of time for questions and hoping that it can give you some good value, even though a lot of what I'm saying will be not news to many people on this call. However, not there yet. Let's get back to my personal motto. It has to be done right. When riding a motorcycle, as Hunter S. Thompson wrote, there is only the barest margin and no room at all for mistakes. And I can't think of any undertaking where that's more true. Not doing it right while riding a motorcycle risks physical injury, death, or worse. But it's wise to apply the same edict to business. Not doing it right can mean things like carrying excessive inventory, wasted movement, inefficiency of a myriad of forms. These things will eat into profits and over time drain the resources and vitality of a company, perhaps to the point of insolvency. But if your business is making things, if your business is manufacturing, these problems pale in comparison to not making them right in the first place. Not making things right leads to costs for sorting, extra inspection and processing, rework, and worst of all, scrap. Nothing hits the bottom line of a manufacturing company harder than scrap, and nothing will destroy your reputation faster than defective product ending up in the hands of your customer. These days, impeccable quality is table stakes. It's the price of entry into the game. And so truly, we have here another example of where it has to be done right. Fortunately, Plex QMS is focused entirely on how to do manufacturing right, and it's very good at it. Here's a partial list of the most important components of Plex QMS. I'll go over each in turn, explain what they are, why they're important, some of the salient points you should know about them. I'll mention some recent enhancements, which might be news depending on how well tuned in you are to the release management broadcasts from Plex systems. And here's where I wanted to bring that first poll up before we go further. I'd like to ask you for your relationship with Plex, so I've got a better understanding of our audience here today, as to just how deep into Plex and how deep into Plex QMS all the folks on this call are.
Okay, so we'll give everyone a minute to answer that polling question.
And I'm not actually seeing the poll result.
Okay,
And I don't want to push any buttons and break something.
no problem. So 61% use Plex MES and Plex QMS. So that was definitely the highest result. Second place uses Plex MES and plans to use Plex QMS. And then we have a 6% on does not use Plex MES and QMS, but plans to, and 6% that does not plan to use Plex.
Okay, so no answers for interested in standalone Plex QMS?
No, I do not. That was a 0% of the people that answered on does not plan to use Plex MES, but would be interested in it.
Okay. And I will then move on. So for a lot of you folks, as I suspected, 61% of you, this is not going to be a whole lot of news. There might be a few tidbits of new information. For some of you, here's an introduction to Plex, and again, maybe a good orientation as to where Plex is with QMS and what it is. And what we do is start with Advanced Product Quality Planning, or APQP, which is critical to doing it right, because the farther things go before fundamental problems are detected, the more expensive they are to fix. APQP helps us not only detect problems early, but prevent them entirely. It starts with an honest and detailed review of what we already know about the parts we make and how we make them. And it never stops. APQP needs to be a living, breathing thing, continuously improved and ever evolving in light of new knowledge and experience. And in Plex, APQP is accomplished by the creative application of templatized checklists, easily updated on the fly as new tasks and requirements are identified. It uses notification-driven assignments and leverages multiple elements of the broader system, in particular document control. Failure mode effects analysis is an important tool for identifying and preventing potential causes of things not being done right and responding with permanent corrective actions when the unforeseen does occur. And like APQP, it should be an ever-growing body of institutional knowledge about how we make things and how to make them correctly. Now, we may be required by our customers to submit documentation that we performed FEMA for the parts we supply. And it's often considered unnecessary paperwork and a burdensome necessary evil. But I encourage the use of FEMA for the tool it's intended to be. The Automotive Industry Action Group, or AIAG, is a consortium of North American automotive OEMs and suppliers. AIAG's FEMA 4th edition has long been the standard for how FEMA is performed within the supply chain of the US Big Three and other OEMs such as trucks and off-highway equipment. And FEMA 4th edition has recently been superseded by a new standard developed by a collaboration between the AIAG and its German counterpart, Verband die Automobilindustrie, or the VDA. In response to this, in 2020, Plex added an entirely new process FEMA application compliant to the new AIAG and VDA FEMA, and it features important improvements, including a FEMA first design, which allows creation of a FEMA even if there are no existing part specifications or control plans. The first ever combo box to be provided in a Plex application, which greatly improves the reuse of standard terminology within and across FEMAs maintained by the organization. The ability to quickly and easily bulk assign an unlimited number of associated parts that share a common manufacturing process, and also standardized upload and download functionality. Please see the Plex community, where I wrote exhaustive product release notes, including video demonstration. And here I had a second poll I'd like to ask folks about FEMA. I've lived most of my professional career in the AIAG world, supplying to the US Big Three. I know Honda is different, and folks at this conference, of course, are Honda suppliers. Some of them may supply to customers other than Honda, or in addition to Honda. And so I just like a little bit of feedback from the customers here, or from the audience here, as to how FEMA is perceived among your customer base.
Okay, we'll give some time for those votes to come in. Okay, so 81% say that they are required to submit FMEA as defined by the AIAG.
Okay.
So the big majority there. There's 13% that require them to submit it, but not per the AIAG, and only 6% do not require a submittal at all.
Okay, that's really great feedback to get. It's stuff that I was planning to go out to the Plex subscriber base, which got truncated in December, those plans, but I really did want to find out what the applicability of this new FEMA application was to, the Plex audience as a whole, Plex subscribers as a whole, but certainly to those who supply to Honda. And of course, I'd also be interested in those who supply to Nissan and Toyota, but it sounds like this is definitely a broadly necessary functionality, and I hope that the new FEMA that I was instrumental in developing is as good as it needs to be. All right, so moving on. So we've got part and process specifications. Part specifications are what we use to determine what done right actually means. And this application is the repository of not only the targets and tolerances of the product's measurable characteristics, but also the parameters of the process. In other words, the equipment settings used to make the product. If our process specifications aren't right, the product won't be either. None of these specifications matter if we don't measure them, and that's what control plans, check sheets, and SVC are all about. Now, if Plex QMS had no other applications, this would be the one. As I mentioned, MSP Industries acquired BBC back in 1994. And BBC was bankrupt, and the reason it was bankrupt was poor quality. By implementing Plex control plans, we drove the scrap rate from 25%, and a lot of that scrap was detected by the customer, which is the worst possible scenario, to less than 1% in a matter of weeks. A 1% scrap rate is what you might expect for high volume stampings if these were complex, high precision machined engine and transmission components. So just as an example of how critical control plans are, I can't give a better one. The control plan drives when and how we verify process specifications are correct and when and how we measure the product. Understanding inspection modes, sometimes referred to as inspection steps, is critical. They not only dictate when we do inspections, but also drive system behavior, such as whether a check sheet pops up during receipt finalization or on the control panel during production. The control plan might have multiple inspection modes for a given operation. For example, a setup mode for ensuring the process parameters are correct, a first piece inspection that's a complete layout of the product, and in-process inspections that measure key characteristics during production. A check sheet is essentially a special view of the control plan that's also an interactive data collection interface. It's where an inspector or an operator or automated inspection equipment records the actual values of the specifications we need to control. Building check sheets is a bit art and a bit science, but a key principle is grouping the inspections by gauge used. For example, if the operator has to take measurements using a micrometer, a height gauge, and a run-up gauge, put all the measurements with the micrometer, one after another, on the check sheet. Be aware there are lots of other tips and tricks, such as using color and images to aid the user, randomizing the order of true-false radio buttons, or hiding tolerances to prevent pencil whipping. Plex check sheets facilitate the use of electronic gauges, so the user can simply push a button on the gauge to record a measurement without having to touch the keyboard. The check sheet add API allows registering measurements in the Plex database by automated inspection equipment. And a recent enhancement integrates check sheets with the lot management system, allowing measurements to be aggregated and stored as lot attribute values, thus saving effort and reducing potential for error. Once measurements have been recorded on the check sheet, they can then be analyzed by using statistical process control, or SPC. SPC is applied to key characteristics and process control specifications, so we can confidently ensure we've done things right without resorting to expensive 100% inspection or risking poor quality due to inadequate inspection regimes. Real-time measurement coupled with SPC allows Plex to generate timely custom configured notifications when statistical trends are out of control, thus providing critical advance warning and the ability to adjust the process before non-conforming product is ever created. In late 2020, Plex rolled out an important and long-awaited enhancement that generates these alerts immediately upon add of the check sheet. Previously, the user had to individually view every SPC chart to trigger a notification. The new functionality is much more reliable and eliminates the need for what can sometimes be unnecessary non-value added burden on the operator. And SPC is also an important tool for continuous improvement. Now, in describing check sheets, I often mention gauges or measuring equipment. It stands to reason these devices can be managed by Plex QMS. The gauge management system is a complete gauge inventory with automatic notifications for when calibration is due and provides calibration and gauge study applications for performing those activities. Specific types of gauges or even individually serialized gauges can be specified as required for check sheet measurements, and the production control panel can be configured to validate serialized gauges are present at the work center. PPAP, or production part approval process, is called first article inspection in some industries. Probably has other terms as well. But this is how our customers ensure that we've done it right and how we know they know. We can also turn it around and use supplier PPAP to ensure our vendors have crossed all the T's and dotted the lowercase i's and j's. It's a highly configurable mechanism for organizing, storing, and producing the documentation required for a given level of submission, and heavily leverages Plex's internal document control system. SQM is a discipline spanning both quality management and supply chain management. Some Plex SQM features include self-service supplier registration, quality certifications, and technological capability, and other useful functionality enabled by the supplier portal. Another aspect of SQM is the supplier scorecard. And to be frank, that's had a less than ideal development trajectory at Plex. And one other thing I'd like to say about that is that the very first project for vonBlitz Design's customer number 1 is all about supplier scorecard. I've got some very exciting stuff. Corrective and preventative actions, or CAPA, is represented in Plex by the problem control system. When somebody doesn't do it right, we end up here. This application is unique among Plex modules in providing the ability for users to design an unlimited number of custom data collection forms. Thus, we can make a simple, easy-to-use form for problems of minor import, forms tailored to resolving issues with our internal processes, forms that comply with what our customers require us to submit, and comprehensive multidisciplinary corrective action to uplift the performance of our vendors. Problem control manages collaborative customer and supplier cross-functional teams, cost recovery, effective inventory containment and disposition, and much more. It's an essential element of the PDCA, or Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, by ensuring corrective actions are permanent and preventative in nature, by identifying recurring issues and driving updates to FEMA control plans. More than one Plex subscriber uses Plex exclusively for its problem control module, and this powerful supplier portal-enabled application is often utilized for more than just tracking and resolving problems. We can't escape the requirement to comply with any number of industry standards and customer requirements, nor should we. These standards are systematized collections of best practices designed to help us do things right. It's important to keep in mind that many, if not most cases, requirements are guidelines to which compliance can be demonstrated by simply saying what we do and doing what we say. Plex provides a compliance application where we can build mirrors of these standards around which we'll construct our internal procedures and practices. We then use the integral internal and supplier auditing capabilities to audit our suppliers, not to punish them, but to continuously improve and uplift them. And we audit ourselves for the same reasons, and to prepare for the day when customers and third-party registrars show up at our plant. We want to be able to compellingly demonstrate that we're indeed doing what we say we do. And Plex is pretty good at that, pretty darn good. I once interviewed a registrar and asked what I could do, product manager, to improve Plex QMS so subscribers could even more easily demonstrate superior levels of performance during audits. And the answer was, the more of Plex your customers use, the better they'll do. Plex has historically proven a powerful asset during audits, earning a reputation approaching legendary status in the automotive supply chain world. By way of example, and with apologies to those who have heard this story before, because I do certainly love to tell it, more than once I've heard something like this. The IATF certification audit is scheduled over 3 days. On Monday, the audit team arrives. They're informed the company runs Plex. In that case, the lead auditor says, Wednesday is golf. At this point, I'm happy to entertain questions on any subject, but here are a few topics with which I was recently involved in my capacity as Plex Senior Product Manager.
Okay, we do have a couple of questions. So let's see, someone is wanting some clarification around what you mean about standalone Plex QMS. Can you tell me more about this?
Yeah, that one is, for years, Plex has had a stellar quality management system. It's certainly industry leading. And many of the customers that have come to Plex over the years have come because they were looking for a quality system. They heard Plex quality was good and ended up buying the whole ERP package. But we've always thought, there's a lot of customers that aren't looking for a whole ERP package, but certainly need a quality system or want one. And shouldn't we be able to just sell them quality? And we've kind of done that a few times with customers with configured deals where maybe they're only using problem control or they're only using the broader QMS package, but really not using MES. They're not running their production and inventory on Plex, but they're still using Plex quality. But all of those have been kind of custom configured deals. And last year, we really put the time and effort into parsing out just the quality management system and then all of the other things that are required to support quality management. So for example, and when I say we, I was certainly integral to this effort of going through and isolating what are the quality packages, what are the quality management modules, and what do they need, what are the dependencies in the bigger system. Because for example, you can't really use quality management system effectively without having part list, right? Maybe you don't need your part list for anything else and you would import that via some integration. But you got to have a parts list in order to really effectively use most of the quality management module. So we worked really hard to configure exactly the packages that you need. There were a couple of different levels of it, and it is now available for sale as a QMS standalone. So for those customers that come along now that really aren't looking for an ERP package, and there's a few that we've turned away or have walked away from deals because they came in and we would try to sell them the entire ERP package because we really didn't have QMS standalone packaged. Now we do have that packaged, and I say we as if I'm still at Plex, but I still consider myself a Plexian, always will. And that is now an available thing. So for, if you hear about people that are looking for QMS, but they're already running SAP or Oracle for their corporate ERP system, Plex now really has a tight package of QMS standalone.
Okay, great. So let's see, a comment from Jeremy. He says he is also an Eagle Scout. So from Brian, we have a couple of questions. Is there a cap on the number of part specifications a part can have? And is there a cap on the number of specs that can be tied to a control plan?
The answer to both of those is no, there's no limits. By the way, I would like to clarify, I was a scout, but I never made Eagle. So my son, however, did. So.
Okay, let's see.
No limits to the number of now there may be practical limits to how many specs you can put on a check sheet and be able to actually execute a check sheet. But we know of and using automated inspection, there's lots of check sheets that have been built in Plex that have got hundreds, if not thousands, of rows on the check sheet. So you can certainly have extremely large check sheets if you can actually execute those check sheets, in a timely manner.
Right. Okay. How does the setting synchronize problems control across PCN group work?
That's a great one. So for those who don't know much about lot management, which is a relatively new functionality of Plex, and not all customers are using it, but it's certainly out there and it's proving itself very well. There are aspects of lot management, and lot management is basically the segregation of inventory, for example, by when it was produced. If you're in food and beverage, a lot is typically going to be what did I make of this particular product on a particular day. But if you're making car parts, and I've always said this, and when we started building lot management, we built it in response to supporting food and beverage manufacturers. And I said, my folks and the world I come from in making car parts, we would love lot management, and Plex always should have had it. So I was completely on board with building it. And it has proven out. There's customers that are definitely using lot management that do not make food and beverage. But there's an aspect of lot management which says, what are the attributes of a particular lot that might change from one lot to the next, the thing that you make from one day to the next, or maybe one production run might be considered a lot, or the production from one particular work center might be considered a lot. However you want to define the lot, that's up to you. But if you've defined what your lot is, you can measure the characteristics and say, these are the characteristics of this lot. And it's what, if you're doing a food and beverage thing, you'll put on the product certification, the certificate of analysis. And it will say my sugar content is this and my fat content is that. And that might vary from one lot to another depending on all of the variable attributes that might affect production. Probably less important if you're making car parts because they tend to be pretty rigidly controlled. However, regardless, if you have lot attributes, they tend to reflect part specifications. Usually you have a lot more specifications than you do have lot attributes. But for those lot attributes that do map to a part specification, and that's how it all works, is mapping a particular lot attribute to a particular part specification. When you do that mapping, there's a specific interface that says, I'm going to map this specification to this lot attribute, and then I'm going to aggregate it in a certain way. So if you take a check sheet and say, I'm going to take 5 measurements, maybe on a particular attribute, you say, I want to take my highest measurement of those 5 and make that my lot attribute value. And then for some other lot attribute, you might say, I want the lowest. And for some others, you might say, I want the average. For others, you might say, I want the first non-conforming. So if I have any non-conforming, you can certainly take a check sheet and record an out-of-spec measurement. And I certainly encourage you to treat your check sheets realistically. If you make parts that are bad and you measure them and they're bad, you shouldn't fake it out and say, wow, I don't want to record any bad measurements. If you're making bad parts, you need to know. So there's 5 or 6 different ways you can aggregate a set of measurements on a check sheet and then send that single aggregated value as the lot attribute value.
Okay, great.
And then what? Submit the check sheet.
The last thing here is just a comment. It said that they had a similar experience during an audit when the auditor discovered they used Plex QMS. The auditor smiled, relaxed, and the process was smooth. So a lot of times just having a good system that the auditors are familiar with will go a long way. Yeah,
Plex has got a great reputation in that regard. I personally used it when I was at BBC. Like I said, we bought that company. The quality was terrible. Quality and delivery. Delivery was terrible because quality was terrible. We had to keep making parts over again because the first one was scrapped. And once we got our control plans in place, started making things with a good process and rigidly enforcing the discipline of measuring the parts according to the control plan, once that was off my deck, and it was like, okay, we're making good parts now, let's get registered. And in those days, it was ISO 9000. And so I wrote a quality manual and used Plex as our, to get registered with ISO 9001, and nailed it on the first try with no major non-conformances. So, but the auditor was extremely impressed by Plex, and that was back in, like I said, 95, 96. All 80 character green screens. I mean, we certainly didn't have anything like what we have today. But same basic principles of being, the main thing that's great about Plex, doing an audit with Plex, is that, the traditional ways back in the day, the auditors come into the conference room and you end up with a table full of paperwork. And the auditor says, go prove to me that you did this check sheet, right? And somebody runs down to the production office and digs through this dusty file cabinet to come up with the proof that you actually took a measurement. In Plex, you just say click and you show it to them, and it knocks their socks off every time.
Very true. Okay, thanks, John. I really appreciate your presentation and your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity.